think it's 2 billion people around the world that don't even have the ability to get a bank account. Brian or Aidan, could you comment on just the ability that this might have over the next number of years, people who are unbanked have the ability to have a bank and transact? Could you provide some comments on that?
Yeah, I would start by saying that the technology and ability to access, as I mentioned, this global financial layer is very important. And what we're watching right now is a bifurcation in our traditional financial system. We're seeing countries be cut off. We're seeing people's bank accounts being shut off. We're seeing businesses not able to get a bank account as anti-money laundering and know your customer rules continue to ramp up. And some of them are for very good cause and important. You're seeing it become more difficult to perform a lot of economic activity. The question is going to be who has the right to approve that economic activity, who has the right to give people a bank account, and the people who are outside of that system who have been traditionally kind of left behind, where is their access going to be? I think that there's a fundamental question for Canada. Do we have a responsibility to people in other jurisdictions in the world to help them be part of financial inclusion? And I suppose you could argue this either way, but the reason that I'm so excited about Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of these layers is that I think as the world bifurcates further, countries get cut off from our economic activity, people are going to move towards something that is more open and inclusive than what we have. And so I think that a lot of the potential here is to give access to those people who are outside of the system. I think that we're still a ways away. The cost to transact on many of the big networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum may still price out people in developing countries, but it will get there over time.
And one of the things we can speak to as well is the development in wallet technology, specifically self-custody wallet technology, which, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, the idea of having 2 billion people leveraging blockchain technology for their financial inclusion would be, a complicated and complex thing to discuss. But what we've seen over these last, say, 5 to 10 years is a huge influx of these self-custody wallets that leverage some really exciting cryptographic primitives to ensure that people do have the ability to recover while still having full self-custody. And so the technology is now at a place that it's never been before to enable those 2 billion people, as you mentioned, to now be included into this new world.
And I think about, and I wish I had a lot more time to ask questions here, but I think about one other real practical application is that our Canadian dollar, we may gripe about it from time to time, how it is against the pound or the American dollar or what have you, but it's fairly stable. Countries like Lebanon, Turkey, other countries like Argentina that have seen their currency crater against the US dollar and their wealth in a global perspective have seen it wiped out. And I also think about the French African colonies that work off the French franc, the 14 countries there. There's Nigeria is another one I can think of. This gives them an opportunity to own a digital currency that protects some of their wealth. Do you guys have any comments on that?
I would agree with that. Even though Bitcoin seems extremely volatile, and it is volatile, and it has been since inception, the question is, do people have a fundamental right to opt out of a monetary policy in their local jurisdiction? It's not something that I can say, 100% everyone should agree yes, 100% everyone should agree no. The fact is that's what these technologies enable. If someone was living in Argentina and holding the Argentinian peso when it was 1-to-1 to the US dollar, the government then converted their US dollars into pesos at a worse rate than the bank a number of years later. And now I haven't looked at the rate recently, but was something like 90 pesos to $1 US recently. Citizens in that jurisdiction, 100% would benefit from being able to hold Bitcoin or a tokenized version of a US dollar or a Canadian dollar. And that's where I actually see the opportunity is, as I mentioned earlier, when we're thinking about CBDCs or the digitization of the Canadian dollar, is there an opportunity to leverage into this technology, to lean into it in a compliant way, in a way that's very collaborative with industry, and recognize that people are going to want to hold other national currencies in a way that they haven't maybe had access to before. US, as much as they may complain that The tokenized US dollars, the stable coins have been issued without oversight or in a compliant way. Reality is US dollars have become the default quote currency in many of the decentralized finance applications. Hundreds of billions of dollars are now sitting in tokenized US dollars. And so I think the US can lean into that and try and encourage more countries to want to adopt their currency. And that's also an opportunity for Canada to figure out how do we push our currency into this tech and help other countries and strengthen the long-term ability for the Canadian dollar to remain relevant.
Quick question? Okay, yeah. And so just on the currency thing, it's not to replace, but it's maybe to protect some of your wealth through a US dollar coin or something. The last question I'd ask is, we're studying moonshots in our Science and Technology Committee, and I'm just wondering, Brian, you see a number of proposals come through your desk through ETH Capital. What are some amazing projects that are out there that could be complete game changers for the world?
I admittedly don't know what a moonshot is. I'm not sure if that's an application or an NFT, but I think, you know, the technology today that's really exciting is figuring out how do you scale up these networks to allow transactions to take place at a fraction of a penny, and what type of economic activity can happen if that becomes a reality in a secure way. I can't speak to other blockchains. Helium was mentioned before. I'm not really sure what that is at a tech level, but I think that scalability and having the right to transfer something at a fraction of a penny anywhere instantaneously is something that is very important. At the same time, I think a lot of proposals are going to be developed in the coming years for financial institutions to figure out how they can leverage this technology and these open layers to digitize some of their current activities or use it for faster or more efficient settlement, while respecting that they're going to need privacy. So zero knowledge proofs is something that speaks to, can you transact in a way where a bank is not exposed to what that activity is to the open public, where people can't just see what it is, but they can prove verifiably that they have a certain set of reserves or that a certain trade did take place? That is developing very much in the background and going to be a big part of the next few years. Scalability and financial institutions leveraging the technology into a way that benefits their existing systems.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, I don't know what moonshots are.
We might have some more time towards the end, but I'll go now to Madame Lapointe for 5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be sharing my time with my colleague,
Mr. Hyman, and I would like to shift away from cryptocurrency and explore other uses for blockchain technology. In your opening statement, you mentioned how blockchain technology can be a model for change, and you cited an example where a world food chain was created. And I know I've heard the Minister of Industry, Minister Champagne, say that when he meets with world leaders, food security is one of their top concerns. And so you've touched on it a few times now, but can you explain to us how blockchain technology can be used in fostering food security globally?
Absolutely. Looking at how we utilize centralized databases right now to ensure for accountability of things like food supplies is unfortunately in a position where anyone in a position of power can influence those numbers, while at the same time we don't have assurances that when capital is sent, wherever it's sent across the world, that it's used specifically for the things we demand it be used for. And so with blockchain technology comes an auditability to know exactly what information lies where and who is able to manipulate that information, obviously not always in a negative way. And with that comes also, again, the ability to audit the financial trail as well in a way that any person can see for themselves exactly where each dollar is going.
And when we look at peer countries like the UK and Australia, where they've developed their government's policies and strategies around blockchain technology, would you suggest that there's some good lessons learned there for Canada?
I would say the greatest opportunity right now is to stand out, is to do so much more than anyone around us, right? So many people are waiting for someone to take lead. And as has been mentioned, we've seen some incredible adjacent legislation in Estonia with the with their ID system, their online IDs for their e-residency program. And that really blew everyone away, right? It was never really considered on such a global scale to see something like that. So I would actually say that the opportunity here is to stand out beyond our peer nations and to be that hotbed for incredible moonshot innovation that can come by fostering local initiatives to be based in Canada and not to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you to my colleague, and it's great to sitting in on the committee today as a replacement for one of my colleagues. But very interesting discussion. This question relates to risk exposure. I'm not sure who wants to take it, but do we have data on the number of Canadians who have crypto assets, not ones that would be regulated in Canada, but abroad? Is there any information on that?
I can assist the committee with that. I believe your question is getting at the number of Canadians who hold crypto assets, but do you mean with foreign platforms?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. So the Ontario
and therefore
Securities
regulated in different countries,
or perhaps not at all.
Or unregulated. That's right.
So the Ontario Securities Commission recently did a survey that's quite instructive in this regard. So it not only captured the number of Canadians who own crypto assets, and I believe I mentioned it in my opening statement, it's about 3.75 million, but 12% of Canadians. But the survey then goes down to break down the crypto trading platforms that are used by Canadians. And so it has percentages of Canadians, of the people who hold crypto assets, what percentage of them use which platform, and list them by name. And I noted in my opening statement that 3 out of the 4 crypto trading platforms most used by Canadians are actually foreign owned. So we could certainly provide the committee with a copy of that survey. It's published by the Ontario Securities Commission, which provides that in more detail, but that would give a sense of how many Canadians are using foreign platforms and holding their crypto assets abroad.
I'm not a member of the committee, Mr. Chair, but maybe the committee would benefit from that information. As I say, it's a question on risk exposure, and if Canadians hold crypto assets in environments that are either regulated to a small extent or not regulated at all, it's an important question that merits consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now turn to Mr. Viss for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses here today. I think this has been the most exciting meeting we've participated in since I joined this committee, and that's a huge compliment to you, the industry you're working in, and in some of the language used today, it's like the seismic shift that my children and many of the children of MPs around this table will invariably experience in their lifetime. Just maybe a quick question to Mr. Mossoff and Mr. Thomas to start off, just so I'm aware. So in some of the testimony today, we heard about cold storage. Where's most of if I'm that young person under the age of 40 who has a couple $1,000s in Bitcoin or a coin issued through Ethereum, where's the cold storage today? Where is it physically located?
I'll let Mr. Thomas chime in, but as I mentioned, I don't believe that the young people today are likely buying structured products like Bitcoin or Ethereum ETFs. Those assets are being held in custody or cold storage with largely Gemini or Coinbase. These are 2 U.S. Highly regulated, highly respected entities. Gemini, for example, holds a BIT license in New York. They're a trust company. They're the gold standard of custody. But I don't think that most I don't want to say under 40, but people who want to engage in a self-hosted wallet are the people who are buying the assets through that avenue. I would assume that those individuals are either holding their assets on a crypto trading platform, and it's up to that individual crypto trading platform how they are doing the custody. and it could be very well that they're using Gemini or Coinbase on the back end. They perhaps are using a software-based wallet called Fireblocks for some of the custody. Or the individual is withdrawing that asset to a wallet that they are in control of. It can be software-based, it can be hardware-based, hardware being a little USB key that they plug into their computer. And I also would point out that it's not risk-free. A lot of people say that that is a solution. It just comes with a different set of responsibilities. So that end user would have to secure that wallet and have an appropriate backup to ensure that they don't lose their funds.
Okay, thank you. Some other stuff, just in summary of what we've heard today, and anyone can chime in on this. So this is the first study done by Parliament, I believe, on blockchain. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
I can't speak to all other committees.
Yeah, but
I would
generally
think,
it's one of the first where we're actually looking at this, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, and today's testimony was instrumental in having a better understanding. What I heard was that we need a national strategy for retail investment. We need asset custody regulation, and we need better policies for insurance. As a committee, when we're drafting a report to Parliament and the Minister of Industry, what other key points that haven't been mentioned today need to be covered in any type of national framework that we begin looking at to get this right, to protect Canadians as they embark into this new new reality, as it was referred to in some cases today?
I would just add in one very small thing, which is that understanding that while we protect Canadians, while we set off on that journey, of course, in good spirit, it may mean blocking those same Canadians from participating in the cutting edge technology and opportunities or assets. They're kind of at two different ends of the spectrum. Striking the balance to me is the key, and not just leaning completely towards protection, because protection might just mean block them from essentially every asset and every activity that's at the cutting edge of this industry, saying they can buy some Bitcoin, they can buy some Ether, nothing else. And what that will lead to is no businesses, no jobs, and perhaps missing out on future assets that are valuable while protecting them.
Thank you, Mr. Mossoff. I have such limited time. Anyone else want to chime in on that point?
Very briefly, I would suggest adding taxation to your list. There are various issues relating to taxation of transactions of crypto assets that could bear from clarification to assist Canadians, and also to ensure that to the extent Canadians are using foreign platforms, that the revenues and profits that those platforms are generating from Canadians' activities are being appropriately taxed and received by Canada.
Okay. Anyone else on that point?
Related to that is enforcement of unregulated offshore platforms. So taxation is certainly one way, but other sanctions would be helpful as well to ensure that Canadians are using Canadian platforms.
Thank you so much.
But just if I could add to further Mr. Mossoff's point, there's, as he mentioned, a spectrum where the most innovative, the most kind of future-looking technologies are unstoppable, are centralized versions of some of the centralized kind of services that you're talking about regulating right now. And we need to ensure to empower Canadians to be leaders and not followers. And that means enabling them to engage in Web3 beyond, just access to, as we're talking about regulating today.
Thank you. One very broad-based blue sky question. Maybe Mr. Mossoff is actually best to answer this. What I'm hearing today, it's tones of revolutionary language in the way we live our lives, the way we interact online. I think everyone would kind of agree with that consensus. Just in the geopolitical world that we're living in right now, a lot of people have Iran and China on their minds. Does it say, because this technology is so new and nascent, say in China with the state controls that they have on internet usage now, are Chinese citizens able to participate in the blockchain economy in a free way like Canadians can right now? Or has the state already intervened to stop that from taking place?
I believe that in China, many citizens are able to run VPNs and likely participate on-chain in various activities. What China can do, or any state or country, is regulate the on and the off ramps and essentially block their citizens from being able to exit or enter that economy with their local currency.
Does anyone else want to comment on the application of these technologies in totalitarian states?
I mean, what we're seeing from these states is absolutely a stance against blockchain tech and everything it stands for, because they do not believe in freedom. They do not believe in liberty. And quite frankly, they see this technology as stifling the ability for them to have that totalitarian control. And so what we are seeing, and I can add this to my list of things to share with the committee, we will definitely make sure to share how these totalitarian regimes are regulating blockchain tech and stopping progress, and in turn causing a brain drain that we have to avoid here in Canada.
Thank you all for your time today. This was really, really beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Viss. I'll now turn to, actually, before I do, I need unanimous consent for this committee to keep going until 1 p.m. Because the bells are ringing. Do I have unanimous consent? Great. So I'll now turn to Mr. Dung for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First thing, I think was Brian mentioned that right now there are 3.7 million Canadians holding crypto asset. Is that right? Okay.
It was Mr. Thomas, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. and out of the 3.7 million Canadians, how many would you say that they are holding the asset as an investment, not as a tool that actually used for trading in the blockchain technology?
I do not have the numbers committed to memory, but I do recall that information, there is some information on that topic that is in the Ontario Securities Commission study that I referenced and undertook to provide to the committee. I'd also note that the Bank of Canada has done some studies in this area about not only who is holding Bitcoin, but also the purposes for which they're holding it. I would also be pleased to provide a copy of that study by the Bank of Canada to the committee.
Thank you. That's great. And I have to confess that, to this point, in my head, or observation, if you will, has a lot of contradicting elements to it, because there's a lot of uncertainty with this technology. We heard honorable members talk about in some countries that they don't even have bank accounts, whom that may benefit from this technology going forward. But in my head, I'm thinking, you need internet, you need, some sort of digital platform to run these and some basic understanding, so you have the confidence and trust in the system compared to the traditional, tool for trading, which is cash or foreign currency. So there's a lot of contradicting parts to what we were talking about today. But what I'm very concerned about is what you said about tokenizing, U.S. dollars. I say U.S. dollars because it is the currency of trade. U.S. Reserve has, enormous power in the last decades, and in terms of who gets to move what around the world. And decentralizing is going to stand up to that structure, for good or for bad. I don't know if Canada's going to benefit, or because we're so close to U.S., our economy is tied. I just want to collect your thoughts on this. First is, would this present opportunities for Canada, a medium power country, to be part of that conversation in the next frontier of determine what is the currency or what is the tool used in the trade, and ultimately, that kind of says the allocation of resource on the planet. And at the same time, what kind of challenge do you not think that large countries like China, United States will come up with their own public fund-backed currency to own this piece of the market share, to continue dominant on the decision on who gets what around the world? I'll get your thoughts on this.
This is a question that I'm extremely passionate about, and I think about it a fair bit. I 100% believe that there is an opportunity here to lean into this world. And the way that I think about this is, let's say right now, 98%, I'm just making up a number here, but let's say 98% of transactions that take place in Canada are denominated in Canadian dollars, and then 2% are in foreign currency, tap when they go to pay. The question that I ask a number of people is, in 10 or 15 years, as the next cohort becomes more comfortable holding their assets on a digital wallet, and it could just be Canadian dollars on an iPhone or a smartwatch. This is not a smartwatch, but pretend it was. The question is, when that group of people in 10 years from now grows up understanding NFTs or an in-game asset like a sword in a highly popular game, and those marketplaces become more connected, more fluid, higher velocity, lower friction, will they still be paying 98% of their transactions and denominating their net worth, the way that they think about their life, in Canadian dollars? If you think that that number potentially is lower, that it's 90% or 85%, what we're really talking about is Canadians over time having less and less interest in doing commerce denominated in Canadian dollars. Now, therein also lies the opportunity, though, because I believe that the frontier of crypto or digital assets is going to be who gets to be a dominant player in this new financial system and part of this big economic activity. And whoever leans in and designs those dollars.
I hate to interrupt you because I know it's a big question and it deserves a big answer. Could you write a paragraph? And because I really want to hear, to see actually what you have to say about this, because I want to give some time to my colleague, MP Erskine Smith, on this. And I just want to say one comment. I mean, in the beginning, the money wasn't there. It was created, so there's trust embedded in this tool, so people can trade. So are we going around the circle? And I expect an answer in your paragraph. Thanks. Nathaniel?
Sure.
Actually, Nate, if you don't mind, we're out of time for your round, Han, but it's been 5 minutes already. I know time flies, but we'll have time to come back to to Nate a little later. So, Monsieur Trudel.
Mr. Trudel. The interpreter would like, never mind. I'm going to change directions. Right now, we're experiencing a massive labor shortage in various fields. I was speaking to someone in construction region recently, and we want to build houses in Canada, and we can't even build them. So this is an issue in many industries. I assume it touches yours as well. I'm assuming that you recruit in the traditional banking industry that maybe work for you. I see that there must be a boom in your industry. Where are you recruiting? How do you deal with this? Is there an immigration component? Should we be thinking about this to make sure that we have the people with the specific skills that can work in this field? Or is everything fine and you have the staff you need within the pool of talent in Canada?
If I may, the working in this industry, building businesses in this industry requires employees with a range of expertise to operate a crypto trading platform. For example, we have engineers, we have designers, we have operational professionals, we have anti-money laundering specialists, other regulatory specialists. So we have to bring together all of their various talents in order to operate these businesses. So yes, it is a challenge. And the other challenge is that blockchain and Web3 and cryptocurrency, this is a global market. It's a global industry, and there is intense competition globally for individuals who have the talent and the talent and the expertise to work in this area. So some of my colleagues have alluded to, there are Canadians who have left Canada to work elsewhere in this industry because it is truly a global industry, and the individuals within it are very mobile and can and will leave. At the same time, one thing I would note is the opportunities that it creates, the skills that require are it's very high value employment opportunities. But to your question, certainly it is a challenge, not just because of the general economic conditions referred to, but also the fact that we are competing with businesses around the world.
We can speak directly to, we have 120 colleagues in over 32 countries, and absolutely anything that the government of Canada can do to make it easier for high-skilled or really skilled workers to either come to Canada, be trained in Canada, and to be able to participate in these incredible organizations that are here in Canada would absolutely be appreciated by Canadian businesses. But first and foremost, I think we need to start at the education layer. My co-founders and I come from the Blockchain Education Network, which was a group of university, a network of university groups that were in maybe 50 plus universities 7 years ago. And it is really initiatives like that that help foster kind of the great skills that are necessary to participate in these real high skills opportunities.
If I could just layer on there quickly, I think the hope from my perspective on the employment side is that regulatory certainty over Canadian domiciled entities will foster confidence for employees working with companies in our space. You'll know who the regulators are, who the people are who are running the companies, that they have to be registered, that they have reporting oversight to. So the hope throughout, and one of the consistent themes, I think, and I hope is a takeaway from what you're hearing today, is regulation will drive confidence in a lot of different areas around digital assets and blockchain, including in the employment space. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Trudel. The floor now goes to Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes.
And I agree with Mr. Viss. This has been a fascinating beginning to the study. And so my first questions for Mr. Hyman, and I'm going to go on to other issues other than the fraud, so don't worry. But the blockchain system in those cases is actually very instrumental, was it not, in proving that what we had going on here was fraud, since every transaction in and out of those funds was recorded and kept in the electronic ledger?
Absolutely. And what we saw further is that people on Twitter were the ones breaking the news for the world as to how that fraud was taking place.
Yes, I saw that. So, again, the banks are always obviously worried about being, I don't know if they still call it this, but they used to call it disintermediated out of their business. This was a thing in the 90s where, mortgage brokers basically made mortgages a commodity, and they were looking at other areas where what they were offering was becoming a commodity, and they were losing their connection with the customer. And as they lost the connection with the customer, they lost the opportunity to sell them more products. And I don't know who's most appropriate to answer this. Maybe it's Mr. Gerritsen, since you worked at RBC at one time. What do you see as the evolution of the use of blockchain? Will it replace the traditional banks, or are they spending as much money as, say, the industry is at trying to figure out how to fit into the future?
Sure. No, thank you for the question. My own personal view is that for legacy traditional financial institutions, their most likely path of exploration in this space is primarily on the nature of the blockchain technology itself and what legacy systems can be improved based on that. I would venture that anybody who's currently sitting in a position of market power or dominance, call it that, would be interested in ensuring that they're not disintermediated completely, but would be looking to, find ways where they can retain a sense of their current measure of control. So to answer the question a little bit more directly, I think the answer will be somewhere in the middle. I think right now we've got an opportunity for companies like ours and the members that you're seeing here on the panel to advocate for our positions in being a leader in the space at this time, and we have this opportunity both domestically and globally.
There was some discussion earlier about bank accounts and the challenge of bank accounts in other countries. We also have that here. If you do not have photo ID, acceptable government photo ID, you can't get a bank account in Canada. And there are low-income areas in this country and high immigrant populations in this country where they are yet not at the position to do that. So I would imagine this eventually would have some assistance in that way as well. And perhaps comment on that. But also, Mr. Thomas, you mentioned insurance. I've never known insurance companies not willing to find a way to sell insurance. and make some money. And your parent company owns one of the biggest insurance companies in this country, Manulife. Is there any chat within the Power Financial Group of Manulife or anyone else looking at ways, or is the cost just too prohibitive at this stage for companies to buy it?
I can't speak to the internal discussions within Power, but the challenge with insurance, my perception from being in the market and seeking coverage for our business and otherwise in talking with other players. To a certain extent, the insurance companies themselves, it is they view it as a new category of risk. It's difficult then for them to underwrite the risk in terms of determining what the risks are and what the losses may be. I think there's also, they have regulatory concerns. They obviously, of course, are subject to, and I'm speaking generally, any insurance company answers to a regulator. And if they do not feel comfortable entering this new business line because they're unsure of where their regulator stands on it, then they're going to proceed with trepidation if they're going to proceed at all. But there is certainly demand for it, and not just from platforms in Canada, but really around the world as businesses that engage in crypto assets, they may require various types of insurance and are looking for it. So I am aware, as I mentioned, that the OSFI is looking at it, and that I regard that as a very positive first step towards expanding the insurance marketplace for crypto in Canada. One thing I would highlight is in ensuring that these officials who have been looking at these issues, who are working on these issues, have the support and resources to do that, as they're doing very important work in terms of understanding the nature of the industry, the risks it may create, so that they can provide advice on how to improve the regulatory framework to create those opportunities. But I would highlight again that there is that opportunity, and not just within Canada but globally, because this is a market that remains very underserved at present.
If I could just add there, we do have instances of Canadian companies going to Bermuda for insurance because of the favorable offerings that are there. And absolutely, if Canadian insurance providers would offer these services, Canadian companies and potentially global players would look to Canada as a service provider.
Thank you very much. And at last, we'll now turn to Mr. Erskine Smith for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. I just want to return to, in my last intervention, there was some conversation about this acknowledgement in the industry that some tokens and some companies are less legitimate than others. And Mr. Garrison, on the platforms, the crypto trading platforms that your company operates, is there any acknowledgement for consumers, any discernment for consumers and retail investors as to what would be credible and what wouldn't be credible in terms of the difference as between what apparently is common knowledge in the sector of what's legitimate and what's not?
Sure, I can help, shed some light onto that. So just to give a bit of a scale perspective, if I had to guess off the back of the envelope, there may be 1 million different types of cryptocurrencies, assets that are created. Our platform at any given time will trade about 30 or 36 of them. One of the requirements we are subject to as a crypto trading platform is product due diligence. So we have to review the risk profile of the asset from a technology, operations, legal, and regulatory perspective prior to making it available for trading on our platform. It's not perfect, obviously, but it is better protection than you can get in a lot of other places around the world by having market intermediaries that are held to those standards from securities regulators. Part of that is also disclosure.
When you say around the world, though, you're not comparing yourself to the Canadian framework.
I believe the Canadian framework is one of the strongest in the spaces globally at the moment.
So was Terra? I could before it went bust, I could purchase Terra on your platform.
Correct.
Luna? And so what's the due diligence there?
So the due diligence is on all of those factors. Like I said, it's not perfect, right? That is certainly one case in an instance, and that was a black mark on the industry at large for certain.
Okay, so pause for a second, because of the dozens of products that I'd be able to trade on your platforms, how many are adding a discernible value, a real world value today versus how many of these tokens and coins are speculative investments that people are trading them with the hope that others will perceive it to be more valuable and that it will trade up down the road and they'll profit as a result of that speculation?
Thank you. I think there's a number of questions built in there, but the way I'd like to address it is from a marketplace perspective. And you'll hear a similar sentiment coming from regulators as well, is that we're not in the business of picking winners and losers. What we are seeing is that Canadians are interested in potentially picking winners and losers, investing in speculative assets. So what we are doing is,
despite the fact that there's no, so look, like there are penny stocks in this country, but there's an underlying business case to those penny stocks that there's no, and they may be worthless in the end, right? But it's not to say we're not listing a venture that has no underlying, that is just to say this might be worth more. It says, what did SPF say? It's a box, and the more people put money in the box, the more other people see it as valuable, so the box has more value. I mean, that is something we ought to prevent from a retail investment perspective, no?
So I think one of the ways to look at that question is that disclosure is certainly very important when a new asset is created. What's being said in the white paper that creates it, what are being said by the founders. Platforms like ours do have to provide disclosure statements and risk acknowledgement forms to the individuals who are going to be trading in those. So really education and disclosure are key to address that perspective. And again, we're an evolving industry looking to get it right and as right as we can. And like I said, we're in a stage of evolution, but where we are focused on is disclosure and education for investors in making investments.
So if we're educating investors, how useful do you think this education is? Your principal investor, the namesake of your firm, so-called Mr. Wonderful, and after the fraud of SPF, he's out there publicly saying that he was one of the most brilliant traders in the crypto universe. He also built one of the most robust platforms. We used FTX actively, and then would you invest in him again? And he said yes. I mean, what education are we really bringing to bear with comments like that?
That's a very strong point. Mr. O'Leary's comments in that regard were his own with respect to his own investments, so I can't speak directly to that. But what I can say from a platform perspective is that I'm very happy that our regulators require us to put out disclosure statements that are prescribed, and we do everything we can to make sure that we're adhering to those guidelines on a real-time basis.
Thanks very much. Well, it would be helpful for both Mr. Garrison and Mr. Thomas. I mean, I would very much like to know, in your view and in your company's views, how you think we can better protect retail investors in this space. And so if you can follow up in writing at some point with some suggestions for what we might consider, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would be pleased to.
Thank you very much to all and to our witnesses. This has been, I'll echo my colleagues, one of the most fascinating meeting of this committee we've had. Certainly for me, I take a keen interest in this subject, so I appreciate you taking the time, and this meeting is adjourned. Thanks to all.